This is intended to be a somewhat comedic breakdown of a film and is not intended to be a replacement for watching the film. Please go watch the full film in its entirety on the appropriate streaming service or media. Any criticism is not intended as an attack of the people who worked on the film or anyone who enjoys the film. Thank you. Welcome back to Hell's Driving, everyone, and this time for a change, I'm covering a show, not a film. So this one might take a little while. Um, Alien Earth. Oh God. I think I made it clear in this video that I love Alien. It's my special interest, the center of my entire existence, and in that video I briefly covered which part of the Alien universe I do and don't like, and well, unfortunately this falls into the latter. Now, I will say that there is some stuff here that I like, not much, but some. But most of it I hate, and most of the problems with this fall under the writing, plot holes, ignoring established lore, some really bad dialogue, and just lazy writing. I fear that this video is going to be a long one, so let's get started.
Isn't there anyone who cares about Sid the Sloth?
So, there isn't actually a lot to the visuals. There's some good and some bad. So, let's kick off with the set design. The sets, in particular the ships of Alien, are iconic. So, how does this compare to the classics? Not well. It has some elements of the OG ship design, but something feels off. This is supposed to be set 2 whole years before Alien. So why is the tech more advanced? I'm aware Alien was made in 1979 and Alien Earth came out in 2025, but the in universe tech needs more consistency. That's something that's always been present in Alien. The technology in Alien improves as time passes by. And a really good way to see that is through the motion detector in Alien, Alien Isolation, and Aliens. It gets sleeker and more efficient as the timeline goes on. Technology improves as time passes. So, why is the technology in Alien Earth better than the technology 2 years later in Alien? Or even 59 years later in Aliens? The monitors are sleeker, higher quality. Why is
Zero.
pedestrian tech better than that of
Oh
Weyland
man,
Yutani?
really?
One place where the set design is great is the USCSS Maginot. A lot of the rooms of the crashed Wei vessel feel right at home in Alien, especially Mother. Anyway, let's move on to the biggest element of the visuals, the creatures. Starting with the main event, the Xenomorph. So there are two main Xenomorphs in this, and both come with their own flaws. So let's start with the first one. This is the first Xenomorph we see in the show, and it's okay. It's a little too jet black. The dome on the head should be a little more translucent. It looks like a Xenomorph gimp suit, but it's a whole lot better than the other Xenomorph we see. Now, one of the struggles with this one is we see it in too much daylight. It gives us too much time to notice all the flaws. The main one being the thickness. It's maybe the most obvious guy in a suit a Xenomorph has ever been, which kills the illusion that this is a dangerous alien. Just makes it feel like a cheap cosplay. I'm also not fond of the weird marbled pattern on its head, and combined with the thick neck, you get one of, in my opinion, the worst Xenomorph designs in Alien. This really isn't helped by this scene. It looks like something ripped from Alien versus Predator, and as someone who hates Alien versus Predator, I mean that in the worst way possible. And why the fuck is she stroking this bastard? The Xenomorph is so clearly a human in a suit here. And yes, I know it's always a human in a suit, but that has never been more obvious. I mean, look at it. The way its head moves, the thickness of its neck. I don't know if this will make sense, but it moves like this isn't its head. You can tell this isn't its face. It's moving like its face is here. They also aren't wet enough. Xenomorphs are usually quite slimy, but these big boys are bone dry. Xenomorph drones also have a very snake-like movement, and the runners are way more dog-like. But this is neither. It has the movement of someone in a cosplay at Comic Con. As for the other creatures, they're actually pretty cool. We have the tick, the fly, and apologies for butchering these names, the D Plumbicare, and the best by far, oh god, Trypanointia ocellus. Anyway, the other creatures are one of the best things about this show. They're cool, gross, and what they do is pretty fucking brutal. They fit really well in this world, and I actually like them a lot. Now, interestingly, that is about it for the visuals. The set design is mixed, the xenomorphs look cheap, and the other creatures are cool. That's about it.
Isn't there anyone who cares about Sid the Sloth?
As I said earlier, most of the problems with this show are found in the writing, so get comfortable because this is going to take some time. Starting with the xenomorphs. As I said, the movement is completely off, but going into more detail, the way they move is wrong for the type of xenomorph. They move like a drone at some points, then shift to moving like a runner, which is probably nothing to most people, but it really bugged me throughout the show. There's more wrong with their behavior, but first on to the bigger scale, the timeline. So this is where the main plot holes lie. So this is set in 2120, 2 years before Alien. 15 years after Alien, we have Alien Isolation. Then another 42 years after that, we have Aliens. Moving backwards, we have Prometheus in 2089 and Covenant in 2104. That means we have some complications. So, in episode 3, it's mentioned that before the ship crashed, it was on a 65-year mission. This would place the start of its journey in 2055. That doesn't work for a couple of reasons. So, what do we know? We know that the ship, the USCSS Maginot, is a Weyland-Yutani C-class deep space research ship. Now, let's look at 2055. What didn't exist in 2055? Oh, Weyland-Yutani. It was founded in 2099. So how could Weyland-Yutani send out a research vessel before they even existed? And if you think it was a Yutani vessel or a Weyland vessel that started its journey before the Weyland-Yutani merger, no, because it has the Wei-Yu wings. So do the crew uniforms. And even if you ignore that, let's say Weyland-Yutani did exist. It didn't. But even if it did, which it didn't, the merger of Weyland and Yutani hadn't happened yet, but let's say it did exist, the mission would be a little bit slapdash. Basically, their mission was to collect different extraterrestrial specimens, and they managed to collect these bad boys safely, which is insane once you see the havoc they create. But they are nothing compared to the challenge of capturing a xenomorph. That has been a pet peeve of mine in sci-fi and horror in general for quite a while, where characters will be able to capture or detain a creature or enemy only for them to then find out that the enemy can destroy and decimate all of the people with ease, but they captured it so easily. It shouldn't be easy to capture, but also impossible to stop. If it was that strong and powerful, they wouldn't have been able to capture it in the first place, and that is a problem present here. How did they capture the eye if it's that intelligent and that good at what it does? It gets let out for seconds and it's already wreaking havoc across an entire ship. They shouldn't have been able to capture it as easily as they clearly did. Anyway, as I said, these creatures are nothing compared to the challenge of capturing a xenomorph. Let's not forget that these big bastards, they've already proven themselves. One single facehugger got onto the Nostromo and wiped out the entire crew except Ripley. She only survived by blasting the xenomorph into space. The xenomorphs annihilated the colonial marines. Soldiers, trained soldiers with an insane amount of firepower. They slaughtered their way through a prison and took out an entire space station. Let's not forget, in Alien Isolation, all that happened was one facehugger got on board. They created a nest and annihilated everybody. One single facehugger. None of these people managed to get a single xenomorph back to Earth. They couldn't, even if they wanted to, even with all this firepower. So how did a single research vessel do it, even with the crash? Let's look at how their journey must have flowed or panned out. So they set off in 2055. Now, using FTL, which is faster than light travel, and stasis, It takes about 10 months to journey out to Kalpamos, which is where the moons LV-426 and LV-223 are located. These are the two main places that we have seen xenomorphs across the rest of the franchise. We also know that this is about 39 light years from Earth. But wait, they can't get any xenomorphs from LV-223. At least not for the first 50 years of the mission. The xenomorphs on LV-223 were reverse engineered and basically created by David, but even after that first 50 years, landing there would almost definitely wipe out the crew. That is a moon with indigenous life forms and a bunch of angry xenomorphs, which have likely grown in numbers. It's very unlikely that the Maginot crew would have been able to successfully retrieve at least 6 overmorphs without being overrun by David's kids. Also, the overmorphs created by David were not like the ones on Alien Earth, and this xenomorph definitely isn't a praetomorph, protomorph. So that kind of rules out LV-223. Now, in episode 3, Morrow says that they collected the overmorphs from a faraway moon. Now, the remaining options are the Maginot crew landed on LV-426, the same moon that we see in Alien, Aliens, and Alien Isolation, or they found another faraway moon with overmorphs on it. And I don't really like either of these options. Let's say they investigated the crashed engineer ship on LV 426. If they did, they would have come through the same room that we saw investigated by both the Nostromo and the Nisadora crews. They would have likely used the same methods to get down to the lower levels to find the overmorphs. So, why is there no evidence of this expedition? If you sent human crew members into the lower levels of the derelict, they wouldn't leave without at least a couple facehuggers. So, similarly to the Nostromo crew, they would have left in a hurry, leaving behind any equipment that they brought with them. But as we see in Alien and Alien Isolation, there isn't any equipment. So, that would imply they didn't leave in a hurry. So, if their expedition wasn't cut short, they would have either disabled the distress signal, which they also didn't do because it's still active for the next 17 years, or they would have only sent synthetics who wouldn't need to really worry about facehuggers. But that's also unlikely because A, they only had one fully synthetic member in their crew, and B, they wouldn't know about facehuggers and overmorphs or the threat that they pose to human crew members, so they wouldn't take that precaution. So I think it's safe to say that they didn't land on LV-426. But knowing how the rest of the show is written, I have a pretty bad feeling that they do intend to make LV-426 the moon that the Maginot explored. And even if they don't, I'm not a fan of the idea that there is a third moon with likely with a crashed engineer ship on it. It's starting to get a bit repetitive. And assuming they did find the xenomorphs on some third moon, Weyland-Yutani would then know about that moon. All of their ships have a flight recorder. They would have a perfect record of where the ship landed, so they would know about this new location of xenomorphs. So why wouldn't they keep sending crew to that moon? They know there are xenomorphs there. They've seen a crew already successfully bring them to Earth. Why bother messing around with LV-426? Another thing that doesn't really work with how this is set in the timeline. And even if you ignore the implausibility of where they found the overmorphs and the fact that this incompetent crew managed to do what no one else could do for the next 60 years, it still feels kind of empty. Each story in the Alien timeline follows a trend. In Alien, the Nostromo crew are sent to investigate the derelict by the company with the hope of gaining a living specimen. After seeing that fail, the company try again. Alien Isolation, the Anisadora is sent to explore the same location. They stumble across the Nostromo flight recorder and the overmorphs, leading to a lot of deaths. After seeing that fail, they try sending Marines. More firepower, trained soldiers, maybe they could get a specimen. Burke is sent with them to secure the specimen, and the xenomorphs tear through the soldiers, and Burke is fucked. After seeing that fail, they get word that Ripley and the xenomorph are in a prison, so they send their specialists, and that fails too. Each time they fail, they increase their efforts. They learn, realizing that previous attempts have failed, they then try new things. So if in Alien Earth they see that soldiers, a research crew, and an entire island fail to survive one xenomorph, why the fuck did they bother sending the Nostromo and the Nisadora? Surely they would just jump to sending the Marines straight away. Why waste time? It makes no sense. Another trend that each film in the Alien franchise follows is something I've already mentioned: the technology. It improves as the timeline goes on. Screens, gadgets, weapons, and ships get sleeker and more efficient. Synthetics get less buggy, more intelligent. The tech adapts more, it gets better. Like real world technology, but yet again, Alien Earth fucks with that. For some fuck ass reason, the tech in Alien Earth is so much more advanced than anything we see in this universe for the next 60 years. The cybernetic enhancements, transferring consciousness into a synth, the computers, it's all way too advanced for where this is set in the timeline. This show also tries to have some real world connections, which is one of the main things that scared me when they announced that this was going to take place on Earth. The previous Alien installments all took place in deep space, on stations, faraway moons, in ships floating amongst the stars, and that allows the writers and directors to separate their story from the real world. They still ground it through the acting and dialogue and the tech and other details, but they don't have to establish much of a connection with everyday lives. This is set on Earth, so there's now an expectation to show more connection to Earth life, and this tries to do that and fails miserably. It does it through films. The characters mention and reference movies that exist in the real world, and the films they chose are Peter Pan and Ice Age 4. Why? For context, watching Ice Age 4 in 2120 would be like a person now watching a film from the late 1910s, which isn't too insane, but it's uncommon. But watching Peter Pan in 2120 would be like a person now watching a film from 1858, before films existed. There's a couple of ways you can ground a fictional story. You can use the dialogue and acting to portray realistic relationships to add relatability to the characters in the story, or you can use locations, pop culture, and objects from the real world, but you have to know which one to do. Sometimes adding stuff from the real world makes the world you're watching feel familiar. But in this, instead of it being an interesting link to the real world, it just comes off as a bit of a stupid gimmick. It also raises questions about the technology. Assuming real films from the mid 2010s like Ice Age exist in the universe of Alien begs the question of what other technology exists. What about Blender, Unreal Engine? What about PCs, Apple? Like, if the tech to make a film like this exists, then why would the future technology look like this? Also, this is one of the dumbest shots in the whole show. This is a real shot in this show, and I hate it. Going back to their mission, how much do they spend in stasis? In Aliens, Burke seemed amazed that Ripley had managed to survive 57 years in stasis. We've seen the length of time that you can spend in stasis increase as time goes on in the franchise. But pre-Alien and pre-Aliens, these guys have been out there for 65 years. The more I think about it, 65 years just feels like it was an arbitrary length of time picked by the writers because it made the scale of the mission sound bigger. I don't think they really thought it through. I mean, I don't think they thought anything through. And also going back to the technology, I mentioned that a lot of it is too advanced. The screens are too sleek. Everything is more advanced than stuff from 50 years later in the timeline, and that makes no sense because, as I said, something Alien has always done well is having a realistic progression of technological advancements. But this disrupts that completely. And one of the main technological aspects of Alien Earth that does that is hybrids, a human's consciousness in a synthetic body. In concept, I don't hate that. If it happened 50, maybe 100 years after Alien 3. But in execution, at this point in the timeline, I hate it. It's insanely advanced for where it is in the timeline. And I don't like the way that the synthetic bodies are written and portrayed like superhumans. The way they move. I mean, this jump and superhero landing vibe that it gives, it's very MCU, and I mean that in the worst way possible. Also, she would have definitely broken something from that height. Again, a problem with the tech being too advanced. These synths are too durable. If they were this durable in 2120, how could Parker have taken out Ash in 2122? How could Amanda Ripley take out synths with a big ass wrench in 2137? How could Bishop get ripped in half in 2179? Like, sure, synthetics are durable, much more durable than humans, but they aren't indestructible, especially not this early on in the timeline. This show could have really been something if it was set after Alien 3. Then a lot of the problems wouldn't really be problems. With some small rewrites and fixing the shit dialogue, you'd have a pretty good show. But even after all that, it's still only pretty good. Now, I'm going to quickly blast through some other problems I have with this show. Starting with something kind of small that just bugs me. It's going to sound really petty, but I really don't care. I hate the music that plays as the credits start. A credits needle drop does not fit the tone of Alien. And yes, maybe it rubs me the wrong way that a show I hate is using songs I love, like Animal and Mob Rules, but that's not the point. Now, this show bugged me from the start. Even when it first got announced that it was set before the original Alien, I had a bad feeling. And something small that confirmed my worries in the second episode was the behavior of the xenomorph. They can't even get the smaller details right. This scene right here, why the fuck does the xenomorph drag him away? The whole goal of the xenomorph is to produce more xenomorphs. This human is already right next to some overmorphs. He will get attacked by a facehugger. The xenomorph would just leave him. If anything, it would just watch. Then next, the government, right? In episode 4, it's mentioned that governments didn't work. So the 5 companies rule the world. The companies in question are Weyland-Yutani, Prodigy, Lynch, Dynamic, and Threshold. Now, Weyland-Yutani is the only company in that list that has appeared in other Alien installments. The other 4 were created for the show, which is a very odd choice. I mean, there are already other companies that exist in the universe of Aliens. Seegson, Lorenz Systech Development, Alpha Tech, and a lot more. The other problem with creating these companies that apparently rule the world is if they are that powerful, why have they never been mentioned or appeared in any other Alien installments? Something else that would be fine if this was set after Alien 3. And even with the 4 original companies, the idea that governments didn't work and the world is ruled by 5 companies still doesn't work. We are already aware of the way the Earth is governed. During the events of Alien Earth, which is set in 2120, the Earth would be ruled by 3 major superpowers. The United Americas, formed in 2104 by the unification of North and South America. The Three World Empire, formed in 2088 by the UK, Japan, India, and several other nations. And the Union of Progressive Peoples, a socialist interstellar superpower formed in 2108 by a coalition of nations which includes Spain, Russia, Germany, and more. The main part of this that conflicts with Alien Earth's claim of the 5 is the Union of Progressive Peoples, or the UPP. This was the only of the 3 superpowers to not be influenced by a corporation, which means around a third of the Earth isn't governed by corporations, despite Alien Earth's claims of the 5. Going back to the creatures, I want to talk about this scene with the eye. I love this creature. I think it's really cool, and it's intimidating how intelligent it is. But I don't like that it completely understands English here, and it knows what pi is. I feel like there were better ways to show its intelligence. In fact, I think they already did show its intelligence in a better way in previous episodes. This scene kind of ruined that for me. Also, how did they catch a chest burster with a net that's loosely nailed to the ground? This fucker could easily worm its way out through the edges. I mean, these bastards break through rib cages when they are born. It could easily chew its way through a net. So, onto one of the major plot points of this show. The idea that the hybrids are able to replicate the sounds the xenomorphs make and use that to communicate with them. I fucking hate this. They use it to control them, but that's ridiculous. Xenomorphs can't be reasoned with. And even if they could be reasoned with by other xenomorphs, they aren't stupid. They would know the difference between a real xenomorph and a machine replicating their language. They are intelligent, but they also work on a lot of instinct. They wouldn't waste their time doing all this side mission bullshit. Now, the pinnacle of that heinous plotline is this. This is the moment I hate most in this whole show. This MCU level scene. It's so cringy. What the fuck is this group photo album cover shite? I think this show fell very short by losing all of the real threat of the Xenomorphs. Like, sure, it kills some unnamed extras, but Wendy beheads one with a fucking kitchen knife in a couple minutes. Even for a synthetic, that's insane. And it just makes them seem a lot less dangerous. You don't really worry for the safety of most of the main characters for the rest of the show. There is another way that this show could have been salvaged. Remove the Xenomorph. Remove all links to Weyland-Yutani and the Alien universe as a whole. Make the Eye the main threat, and just make your own sci-fi world. Because if you remove all the connections to Alien, then you have a pretty decent sci-fi show. But as it is, it's one of the worst additions to the Alien franchise. The main thing at fault for that is its use of alien lore, and I use the word lore pretty loosely. It treats the xenomorph like it's a pet. It basically removes their base instinct for reproduction and turns them into a very surface level, indestructible murderer. But the threat of a xenomorph goes so much deeper than that, and I did go into a lot of detail on that in the first Alien video, but to just quickly recap a little bit, they live with the sole purpose of just creating more xenomorphs, and this makes no effort to do that. It's basically functioning like a tamed dog, and that just lowers any actual threat of this terrifying creature. Tack on the fact that the acid blood is barely used, which is another major threat. A very iconic feature of the xenomorph is that sure you could shoot it in your ship, but it might bore a hole through the hull. You could stab it if you wanted to, but the acid will melt holes in your flesh. They somehow took Alien, a masterclass of horror and sci-fi, and made it boring. Anyway, there are so many more problems with the writing, but if I keep going, this video will never be finished, so let's move on.
Isn't there anyone who cares about Sid the Sloth?
So, the budget for this first season, and yes, first season. Unfortunately, this has been renewed for a season 2. Anyway, the budget was about $250 million. Now, for context, let me list off the budget for some other shows from the past 10 years. Loki Season 2 had a budget of $176.8 million. Twin Peaks The Return had a budget of $80 million. And Percy Jackson and the Olympians had a budget of about $120 million. Now, that does put it in perspective a little. Makes me feel like maybe the budget wasn't managed too well for this. Because on a $250 million budget, this was shit. Now, every mistake of this show doesn't surprise me. Not really. Noah Hawley is quoted as saying, "What's amazing after 7 Alien movies is how little mythology there is about how humanity is organized. Life on Earth, all of it. So, I had a lot of leeway to play with. All we really know is that there was this corporation, Weyland-Yutani, and they wanted these creatures pretty badly. And so I made the choice to focus my story on a competing company. But I do think that this idea of Weyland-Yutani is so critical to the identity of Alien, and I want to give the audience that satisfaction of feeling like you're seeing some of who is running that place." Now, I'm sorry, but every aspect of that quote is dumb as shit. I mean, first of all, there's more to Alien than the movies, and even if you're just including what's canon, there's still so much more than the movies. But more importantly, there's so much lore and mythology to how humanity is organized. We know about most of the history of the main companies, governments, and achievements of humanity from the early 2010s all the way to the 2300s. Saying all we know is that there was this corporation, Weyland-Yutani, and they wanted these creatures pretty badly, shows just how little he knows about the lore of the Alien universe. A lot of which he could have learned with maybe an hour of research. He also says that he wants to focus his story on a competing company, as if that hasn't been done before. We've seen competing companies to Weyland-Yutani in canon and non-canon media. There's a whole game with a whole company that we're aware is competing with Weyland-Yutani that it lays it on pretty thick. Also, wanting to give the audience that satisfaction of feeling like you're seeing some of who is running that place. Not only have we seen higher ups of Weyland-Yutani already, but again, there's a film that lays that on pretty thick. In early development, Noah Hawley claimed that the show would be more like the style of the original 1979 masterpiece than the prequels, Prometheus and Covenant. And that claim makes me question if he watched the original film at all. Because in tone, writing, acting, visuals, and practically every other aspect in this, it's nothing like the original film. The Alien installment that this feels closest to is the Alien versus Predator movies, which also blatantly go against pre-established lore, making Alien Earth feel right at home with those pieces of shit. It feels like Noah Hawley watched 20 minutes of Alien, then watched Alien versus Predator, and based his whole worldview on the franchise on that. And he claims to be a long-time fan. He mentions that Alien is in his blood. There is no way he is a long-time fan. He's at the maximum casual watcher because there's so many simple mistakes here and just very bizarre decisions that I don't think any actual Alien fan would ever make. Anyway, Alien is tied with my girlfriend for the most important thing in my life. I adore Alien, and watching this was like watching your child have their head caved in with a sledgehammer. It's like watching your family burn. Your favourite thing in the whole world get shat on, burnt to ash, and then Noah Hawley himself comes out and pisses on the ashes. It's lazily and poorly written, it doesn't fit with Alien at all, and it makes so many simple mistakes that it physically hurt me to remember it all while making this video. You might think I was a bit harsh, but what can I say? It's my autistic special interest, and I may be a little obsessed. Please subscribe. Watching this show was torture. Your subscription could make that worth it.
Now we rule.